Welcome into the I-80 Boys podcast on this beautiful Saturday morning. My name is Chris Falk, and this guy over to my left is...
Sure, boy, old C. Hunt over here, Chris. What's going on, guys? It's a beautiful Saturday morning, about 2 weeks prior to the season starting, like Chris said. Man, I don't know, Chris. I'm ready for some college football. What about you?
Oh, absolutely, man. Gator Swag said it best. 14 days, man, to that Florida State, Georgia Tech kickoff. I'm pumped. I know Christian is. I know most of the college football world is, man. I'm ecstatic, dude. Like, I literally can't wait, not only to watch, like I said, our teams play, but just college football in general to get back into swing of things, man. So, but other than that, Christian, how's it going, my man?
I said, Chris, just living it day by day. I feel like this is that weird part of the year, right? Where we always talk about, you got NFL preseason football on, and it does just enough to where you're like, you get excited about football, but you're also kind of like anxious because it's not really like real, true football. There's no stakes on it, if you will. Chris, are you out here gambling large amounts of money on the preseason, and I just don't know about this yet?
It's funny. I actually just put a bet in before the show on some games today because I am a degenerate gambler. Yeah, I did put some on a couple preseason games today, Christian. I gotta get the warm up in, get the feel of the betting world again. But no, you're exactly right though. It's really tough for NFL preseason. Half of those guys out there are competing for just a spot. As far as the team goes, it's very, very hard to judge. So, yeah.
I got a question for our chat and Chris here. If you don't mind, drop your answer in the chat. Preseason football or a meaningless bowl game?
Ooh.
That's it. That's one you got to think about right there, right? Because you got all the opt-outs, right? Bowl games don't mean what they used to mean anymore. I mean, preseason, they've stripped the games out of the preseason. They're talking about maybe even going to like 2 games or something. There's a lot of stuff there. Preseason or meaningless bowl games, right?
Man, that's actually a really good comparison, dude. That's tough because you said it best. Yeah, bowl game, nobody plays in them anymore. I think maybe with the new NIL deal, that's coming out, I think that might be a little different coming forward, though, Christian. I think they they kind of like an NFL contract, right? You got to play in a bowl game or something like that, which I think would be a good thing just because I love watching meaningful football. I know you do too. Kind of would have been like that Ohio State-Missouri game last year, right? Ohio State barely played any of their players. Missouri played a majority of them. They end up winning that game, but yeah.
Gator Swag says, I wish college football had a preseason game. That'd be cool. I mean, they kind of do, right? When they play those like FCS schools or they, a lot of the programs will end up playing these smaller programs like Ball State or Kent State or whoever. So, I mean, it's kind of like that, I guess. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Like just something that doesn't really actually like mean anything, right? So,
right. That's a very good question though. Like I said, preseason football, NFL though it's tough to watch, man. I mean, unless you're like maybe a fan of a player or something like that, dude, it's pretty tough to get into, in my opinion, because usually the teams that are really, really good, like the Chiefs, the Bills, teams like that, they play about an eighth of their starters for about 5 minutes, and then it's just a bunch of randoms. I hate saying that. Those guys are obviously very good, but yeah, tough to watch though.
100%. Well, Chris, let's take a look at what's going on around college football before we get going. We got a great show for you guys. Be sure to stick around at the end. We're going to talk about 2 teams from some conference called the Big 12 or whatever that barely won it. I don't know. We'll see here at the end. We'll talk about that, right?
Okay.
So looking at just what's going on around general college football, Deion Sanders getting into it with the media, love or hate Deion, every time he comes on, he's going to make headlines, right? Something as simple as him just saying, I don't mess with you, man. Like, I don't fuck with CBS, as it were. Right. And that's basically what happened with this year. And, and I think he's beefing with CBS because they picked him to win, or they didn't pick him to win. They picked him he was the second worst coach, I think it was, in the Big 12, which, I mean, Chris, your thoughts?
I agree. I've said this before. I don't think he's much of a head coach. I think he's more of a hype guy. I mean, honestly, though, if you watch Colorado football games last year, he's not calling plays. He doesn't seem to do the X's and O's, and I'm not necessarily knocking him. But when people say he's a great coach, what has he really done? I mean, he was successful at Jackson State or wherever the hell he was a little bit, but I mean, it's been pretty much follow my son around and Travis Hunter. And I've said this before, and I 100% believe it. He's gone after this year when his son goes to the NFL. So I think a lot of people that really follow college football closely, including you, Christian, agree that, he's not going to be there next year. And this whole media circus around him all the time, he's good at bringing attention to a program. I'll give him that. There's some things he does really well. He can recruit in the transfer portal, but as far as X's and O's, man, there's a lot of other coaches out there that are way better coaches, in my opinion. Guys like Kyle Whittingham, Lance Leopold at Kansas, guys like that in the Big 12 conference that are a lot better coaches. That's just my opinion. What's your thoughts on that, Christian?
I think Deion's style, it can work, but you got to be really locked in with it. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have two really great coordinators in order to pull this off. Deion's whole thing is he's the Pied Piper, right? He's going to bring the talent in. He's going to bring the headlines, but it's up to ultimately the coordinators of that team to get this team into position. They're going to the Big 12 this year. Like you said, after this year, probably Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are both going to be off to the NFL. Even his other son, Shiloh, I think this is his last year of eligibility, assuming he doesn't get hurt, right? Which we don't hope that he does, obviously, but, or we hope that he doesn't. I guess that's the easiest way to say that. But my whole point is, like you said, Chris, I think after this year, what motivations does Deion have to keep him locked into Colorado? It would shock me if he's still there after this year, I think, right? But I also think, too, they are going to the Big 12. We know year in and year out, the Big 12 is kind of an anomaly where whoever you think is going to win it doesn't end up winning it. I mean, so it's like playing Russian roulette almost, or, blindfolded, throw the dart at the dartboard and pick a team. That's who ends up winning the Big 12 year in and year out. So Deion's got just about as great of a shot to win the Big 12 this year, I think, as anybody else, not named Utah.
Yeah, Utah or K-State, yeah. I agree.
Oklahoma
I agree.
But, yeah. So, I mean, no, I think it can work. Deion just needs some good coordinators there in order to kind of keep it on the tracks. And I'm not saying anything like negative about Deion with that. I think it's just his thing is let's get the talent in and then we'll coach him up from there, right? So that's I think that's the major thing. Because like you said, does he call the defense? No. Is he calling offensive plays? No. So, yeah, let's see here. Ooh. Gator Swag says Dan Mullen versus Deion. So basically, would you rather have Dan Mullen or Deion? Chris, I'll let you take that one.
I'll take Dan Mullen. I will. I know that's fucking stretch, but yeah, no, I don't think Deion, like you said, like Deion is just a guy that brings people in. I haven't seen much coaching from him or running a program. And I'll be honest with you, man, I don't have a ton of positives to say about Deion as far as like actual coaching goes, because he doesn't do any of it. And what I mean by that is, like, the guy seems to really, really focus more on the name on the back of the jersey than the one on the front. It seems to be more about clicks and views, like Dan Lanning said at Oregon about Colorado, than actually winning football games at times. And I think that negative attention, good attention gets in the way sometimes. I kind of feel sorry for actual Colorado fans because they know, like we just alluded to, he's going to be gone after this year. I would bet that in a heartbeat that he's gone after this season. And then where does Colorado go from there? You know what I mean? Where do those transfers that he brought in, where do they go?
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, it's kind of the parody of college football. I mean, you commit to go play for Deion. Deion leaves, even if they bring in Jimbo Fisher, whatever have you. Like, I don't know. You're going to have a mass exodus if Deion leaves. I mean, like, that's just to be expected. So you're exactly right. Where do you go from there? I mean, you go out and get an up-and-coming coordinator, give them that job. I mean, they're going to have to probably build it, I would say, through getting mid-tier transfer portal players and just trying to recruit, in that Colorado, Texas kind of area, and just build it up through high school recruiting. So, which any program would do, I would imagine. But yeah, you're exactly right, Chris.
Yeah, it's just interesting thing there for Colorado because, like I said, they're going to be, they're going to have to start over again in 2 years. I mean, essentially, that's his time that Deion's going to be there. And then you're back to, I'm not saying they're back to winning one game when he got there. Colorado was a laughing stock of the Power Five for quite a while. I mean, he's done some good things there, so I don't want to shit on him that way. But it's also like, man, it'd been nice to know if he was going to stay there longer and actually kind of see what he does. Now, where he goes someday, I don't know. Does he go off the NFL and whatever and follow his kid around like he's always done? Or does he actually take a job maybe somewhere else? I don't know, but yeah, I'll leave that up for debate.
So it looks like, I want to talk about this. Arkansas running back blames bad agent for Florida State exit. So we'll click on this. It's Rodney Hill. So I kind of was reading a little bit of this, Chris. I don't know if you've seen this
I have
or
not.
So I just been reading this. Basically, he was at Florida State, and I think his family had hired an agent, like his parents hired an agent to kind of look at doing some NIL stuff for him or something like that. And then basically, he was like a third or fourth string running back for Florida State last year. And basically, because of that, right, I think there was something that the agent did wrong. And so I think Norvell ended up, kicking him off the team, basically. So that's why he ended up at Arkansas. And so it's just crazy to think about that. Like, I know, we always talk about the NIL stuff now and that culture, that we're in that landscape where college football is. But you don't really think about, well, these kids have agents. And
Yeah,
I guess technically he does, and it's like they can come out now and talk openly about it. Back in the day, if a kid ever touched an agent before he declared for the NFL draft, Jesus Christ, your program, he would be suspended for the season. The program would get the death penalty. It would just be terrible.
It's a weird world because, right, it's like the NFL. That's what it's what it's really become. So yeah, that's crazy, dude. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But you're right. Yeah. You couldn't do that years ago. That's a big no. Now you can openly go out and talk about it. Crazy.
I want to keep it parked here. Then we'll jump into the rest of the show that we were going to get into for just a second here. But Harbaugh is going to be an honorary captain for Michigan's opener. I don't know if anybody else finds that weird. Because like literally two other headlines in the top headlines on ESPN's homepages. Harbaugh deflects query about NCAA sanctions, and NCAA punishes Harbaugh for unethical conduct, which they gave him like a 4-year show cause penalty or whatever it was. So it's like, okay, so he can't get hired, by another university or another college program without them having, without him, number one, having to sit out for a year. Number two, having to, basically answer as to why they hired him and why he should be allowed to coach. But Michigan can bring him back. You know what I mean? For their home opener. And how is that? Like, how do they allow that? I guess I don't understand.
Dude, this whole thing, I don't know if you saw his press conference the other day. He was asked about these sanctions and stuff. And finally, he just he does the smirk and laughs about it. Like, yeah, they caught me. But he doesn't have to give a shit, Christian. He's in the NFL. It doesn't matter. I just think the whole penalty thing is weird because he's not going to go back to college football anyway. So it really affects nothing. They're not going to take away Michigan's title. Michigan fans got to witness an undefeated season, something that Georgia did a couple years ago, and win a natty and enjoy that. Harbaugh got his ring. And I'm with you, though. It is kind of odd, though, laughable almost that he's going to be on the sideline. I agree. Yeah. But I don't know, man. This whole world we live in college football is crazy, dude.
They're going to bring Connor Stallions back next. Jesus Christ.
Well, he's got his Netflix coming out here on the 27th. Yeah, I'm going to have him. It'd be funny if they did put him right on the sideline next to Harbaugh.
They'll rename the stadium after him.
Yeah. Oh, my God, man. This whole Michigan thing, man. I'll be glad when this whole thing, that topic's over and done with, to be honest with you. It gets old hearing about it.
Well, I'm sure that'll be part of the storylines over the next year or whatever have you, and then after that, it'll probably die down, and then we'll see what happens with Harbaugh in the NFL. I have no reason to believe he won't be successful. I think, could be wrong, but I think the Chargers might be his last stop.
Yeah. Well, you remember when he was with the 49ers, took him to a Super Bowl. He was a pretty good coach in the NFL. He really was.
Mm-hmm. Pretty damn good. I mean, he's been good everywhere he's gone.
He's a good coach.
Minus the cheeseburgers and Stallions thing, and he's a good coach.
He didn't know nothing about the Stallions thing, remember?
Oh yeah.
Stallions was not getting paid doing that on his own, remember? He was just out there just on other teams' sidelines and nobody knew about it, keeping all this information to himself. So
that man just was trying to show initiative, you know what I'm saying? He had all the initiative, and he was funding himself, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because Stallions, if I remember right, like he wasn't even like a coach, right? He just was an analyst or whatever.
No, he was like, he was unpaid. He wasn't getting paid at all. So yeah, and then finding him on Central Michigan sideline and just dressing up as some imposter over there on these teams and doing it all for free, man. Just keeping all this information to himself, dude.
Out of the goodness of his own heart,
yeah.
Man.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, so we'll segue here, Chris. Who are the best freshman quarterbacks? Now we know obviously this is the 2024 top quarterbacks in this class, right? Who are the best? Who are the guys that can make the biggest impact right away? When we look back at the end of this year and we're recapping this season, who are we going to say, hey, who's the top, couple of guys out of this class that really stand out? Chris, I'll let you kind of start us off here.
I think this is a no-brainer personally, because and I have a list pulled up as well, very similar to the one that you have on 24/7 Sports here. It's going to be Dylan Raiola. I mean, he's going to be starting week 1, so he's going to get the go, and obviously he's probably the most talked about quarterback out there. I mean, so this kid's been hyped up since he was in 8th grade, so I think he'll probably have the most success as far as numbers go. The DJ Lagway one will be interesting, but I maybe you disagree with me, but I think that he's not going to – I mean, I think he'll play a little bit this year in different packages, but they're starting Graham Mertz. I mean, Graham Mertz actually had a pretty good year last year. He's the senior. He's the veteran. I do think Lagway is an interesting recruit, though, because he is very talented. And then unless something happens at Ohio State with Julian Sayin, I don't think he'll probably play too much this year. And then another guy I did want to talk about where actually I think this is the guy that I wish would play. You heard the name of Walker White, Christian. There he is.
Yeah. Yep.
I think if I'm Hugh Freeze, just because my love or lack thereof for Peyton Thorne, because I've seen so much of him, I like the Walker White kid. I hope they actually get to play him a little bit this year. He was very highly recruited. I would like to see him play. I do think that he will definitely be a better quarterback than Peyton Thorne in the future. That's not probably too tough to predict, but he's a guy that I think can really do something there and help Auburn out, because if you notice, it's Florida, Nebraska, and Auburn teams. What do those 3 teams have in common, Christian?
Florida, Nebraska, and Auburn. Yeah, I mean, they all need quarterbacks, man.
Yeah,
like they all struggled last year at throwing the football. Well, except for Florida. I mean, Florida did all right with Graham Mertz,
but they're programs that want to win now, and they have very, 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 very high expectations as far as a fan base goes. And you're right. I mean, they've lacked quarterback play over the years. I mean, that's where I think those 3 schools, like this Walker White kid, could come in and actually give Auburn something on offense. Because we know, especially just talking about Auburn, Christian, I'll kick it back to you here in a minute. We know their offense really struggled last year. Their defense was rated in the top 30, but offensively, they really struggled to score points last season. And I think Peyton Thorne was kind of a problem. My thoughts. I watched him play a ton at Michigan State, was never real impressed with him, but he's a guy I think could get in and play this year. But I do like Dylan Raiola. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and talk about my guy the entire show, but he's people keep trying to tell me he's not starting week 1. I bullshit. I don't know. I don't know if you've heard any of that, Christian, or what's your take on that?
Go back and look at Heinrich Harburg's highlight tapes from last year. A lot of running, not a lot of throw, a lot of interceptions. I can tell you that right now. A lot of interceptions, not a lot of passing. And he got better this offseason. Heinrich Harburg, I think, got better this offseason. But come on, dude, just Dylan Raiola is probably one of the best throwers of the football in this entire class. Okay, he has that arm that just kind of pops out. As Chris loves to say, a guy that, Matthew Stafford, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. Type arm talent, I think. And ironically, his dad played with Stafford, and I think he kind of models his game a little bit after Stafford. But anyways, I mean, Raiola to me has the clearest path to starting, but I actually like Lagway. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the year, we're going to say, hey, going into next year, I think Lagway will have a little more buzz only because he doesn't have to start right away. He can sit back. He can develop for a few weeks, kind of like Gator Swag says. They're going to probably put some packages in there in order to kind of get him on the field, get him some reps, kind of utilize some of that, athleticism. The guy's a big guy, 6'2", 225. By the time the season starts, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's 230, 240. You know what I mean? That college weight room, does things to these kids, right? I think it's a little bit of the alcohol, and I think it's a little bit of the nutrition program, right? But who cares? I think Lagway has the best shot, of probably maybe not putting the best stats out there this year, but creating the best footprint going forward. I think Raiola's going to be really good. But again, as Chris will point out, whether it's Florida or Nebraska, both fan bases demand, I'm not going to say perfection, but they demand a lot out of their teams year in and year out. Okay, both fan bases equally have, crazy high expectations for what they're expecting. Florida and Nebraska fans this year, both very similarly. Just somebody that sits back and watches this non-biasedly, I have to sit back and say, hey, I read a lot of the stuff and I kind of look at what both fan bases say. Both fan bases similarly are saying, hey, our ceiling is like 9-10 wins this year. A lot of people don't think we can do it, but our ceiling is 9-10 wins. Well, if you're going to have DJ Lagway, like they're saying, if Mertz struggles, you got to pivot to a true freshman quarterback, right? That is a lot to put on a true freshman guy. For every Trevor Lawrence, there's another Dante Moore. You don't know who Dante Moore was, a very talented quarterback last year, came down to Oregon and UCLA, ended up going to UCLA at the last minute with Chip Kelly. I mean, he didn't do bad, but at times he really struggled. And that was in the Pac-12, mind you. That was in the Pac-12. Wasn't like he was playing in the Big Ten every day. Wasn't like he was playing in the SEC every day, or even the ACC for that matter. He was in the Pac-12 and kind of struggled a little bit in some of those environments. It's really tough for these freshmen to kind of get in and play. Outside of them, like Chris said, I mean, Julian Sayin, right? He transferred to Ohio State. He's out there with Aaron Nolan, so they're going to battle it out. I think Ethan Grunkmeyer, he's a guy at Penn State, that'll probably climb up that rank. And, I mean, we know Drew Aller. I mean, he's talented as all get out. I think he's their guy. But if Penn State starts getting to a position where they feel like they struggle to throw the football in these major games, why not give this Grunkmeyer kid a shot?
Yeah. I like I said, I think Lagway's talented. I don't think he'll play much this year. That's just me. I think Graham Mertz came back for a reason. He's the veteran guy. I think it'll actually help Lagway as far as next season goes sitting, because you alluded to a guy like Dante Moore, right? He kind of had to play last year. They're kind of in a similar position what Nebraska is this year. There's nobody else on the roster. I mean, Dylan Raiola has to be the guy. And I hate starting a true freshman. Very, very, very rarely does it work out. You got to have a lot of pieces around. Like we remember Trevor Lawrence, you alluded to him. He had how many pieces around him, right, Christian? I mean, that team was loaded around him. Now, Nebraska is not near that loaded, but Raiola is going to get a lot of playing time this year. And I hope Nebraska fans understand that he is going to struggle at times. There's going to be times where he looks really good. There's going to be times where he doesn't look so good. I guarantee it's going to happen at different points during this season. I wish we would have gone out in the transfer portal personally and brought a guy in that had some veteran experience. That was just me. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And Dylan Raiola is going to be the guy, and he's going to be starting week 1.
100%. I agree. Yeah, and it's kind of funny too. Looking at that list, you start thinking, wow, there's really not a clear path for a whole lot of these guys. A lot of talent there, but just not a clear path for a lot of these guys. And you start looking at the depth charts, and you start realizing even Walker White, I think he's listed at like number 3 on the depth chart right now at Auburn. And I totally agree with you. I think give the young man a shot, let him develop for 4 or 5 weeks, and then throw him out there, let him go get some reps.
He's uber talented. I've kind of forgot about him until I looked into those rankings. I'm like, there's a guy that maybe potentially has a way to get in and play. There was another kid, and we could be done with this topic here, but I think his name is like Damon Williams for Washington. He came over from Arizona with Fish. I mean, if Will Rogers, I like Will Rogers. We saw what he did at Mississippi State, but if something were to happen, he's really talented too. They do have him in the waiting over there, and he did come over with Fish. So I'm assuming he feels like he's going to play at some point. You know what I mean? But he was an uber high talented quarterback too out of high school. So, but you said it best, man. You look at some of those guys like Aaron Nolan, Julian Sandman, they're both on Ohio State's roster, and they're not even going to play this year because of Will Howard. And they got another kid on that team too that's pretty highly recruited as well. I can't think of his name. Is it Brown? The kid that played last year, Devin Brown, or whatever the hell his name is? Or am I wrong about that?
Devin Brown. He wears like number 33 or something like that.
Number. Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, man. I mean, they have Lincoln something Holtz or Kirken Holtz or whatever. Probably butchering that name, but he was another. Yeah, I mean, they loaded room. I guarantee you, they're going to probably have a mass exodus. I'm not going to say they're going to have a mass exodus, but they're going to have some people transfer out of that room after this year.
Have to.
So take a look here. We got another hot take coming y'all's way. Clemson underperforms and fires Dabo Swinney. Chris, thoughts on this?
I you know what, when you brought this up the other day, and I had to think about this. I think personally, and this is just me, and I think me and Christian have a little bit different takes on Clemson this season, right? But what we do know of Clemson is the last couple of years, they've regressed as far as the win-loss goes. And I know Clemson has a pretty intelligent fan base. They want to win and compete for ACC titles, which they had won 5 or 6 in a row there for a stretch. We've talked about Dabo, lack of use of the transfer portal. They really have struggled on offense the last couple of years as far as what we think Clemson offenses should do, the days of Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. We remember what happened with Dabo in the fan base last year, Christian. Remember that? What's that guy's name from Spartanburg or whatever got into it? That whole
Tyler,
there you go. Yeah. I mean, I don't like, here's my thing. I think Clemson isn't going to win the ACC title this year. Now, I do think they probably win 9 games. Maybe you guys don't agree with me on that, and that's fine. I know Christian thinks that they are going to win the ACC title, but I don't think they'll fire Dabo. I think they would be dumb. I still believe that Dabo Swinney is a very good coach. I do believe that. I do think that he's going to need to change some of his philosophies, and what I mean by that is the transfer portal. They don't have a receiver you can name. The quarterback, Cade Klubnik, I know Christian we disagree a little bit here on that, but I just don't think he's that good. I've seen enough of him. I thought they should have went out and maybe got somebody else personally, but that's me. But at the end of the day, I don't think Clemson can afford to lose Dabo. The only way I see that happening if things get really, really bad. And what I mean by that is the fan base, he says some more dumb shit. And basically, I think he made the comment last year, if you don't want me here, get rid of me. I think there was something along those lines as well, which I don't think is always a good thing to say. But Chris, I want to hear your thoughts on this, though. I know we have a little bit different takes on Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think it's the university, I think they would have to seriously underperform. Like, I mean, they'd have to start off like 0-6 or something like that to really fire him. But like you said, Chris, I mean, Dabo has built that program and taken them to new heights, won 2 national titles there. I mean, he's kind of elevated that program and elevated the expectations year in and year out. I mean, Clemson started last year off 4-4. Started really to go south, I think, when they had to play Duke to open the year off. By the way, somebody called an upset week 1 on that. I'll just take credit for that. But no, I think that, by the midpoint of the year, I mean, I think Dabo was kind of sick of a lot of the hate, a lot of the stuff they were getting there. Kind of like Chip Kelly. A lot of people wonder, why did Chip Kelly leave UCLA to go to Ohio State to be the offensive coordinator? And I think the reality of that is because he just got tired of dealing with the bullshit that comes along with that, right? He's like, okay, well, if you guys don't appreciate what I'm doing here, which I thought UCLA with Chip Kelly, shot the moon and kind of hit their expectations. Now, they didn't win a national title or anything crazy like that, but he landed a 5-star quarterback. He kind of got them into bowl eligibility. Yeah. He beat USC last year. I mean, what more did you want him to do? Right. Like you said, the defense was really great last year as well, with a first-time defensive coordinator that came from the NFL that, the year prior, they finished 90th, 100th, something like that in total defense, and they really shot the moon with it. So, yeah, but getting back here to Clemson and Dabo, I mean, they do have a gauntlet of a schedule. Georgia, right off the rip, neutral site game, that ain't going to be easy. Then you got App State. We know what App State can do, right? I mean, App State can kind of play upset. I'm not saying they're going to upset Clemson, but they can play spoiler. NC State, they lost to NC State last year.
Yeah, top 25 team this year, Christian, start the year.
Yeah, Stanford, I mean, it's at home and it's Stanford, so I'm not going to quite go there. Then you got at Florida State. I mean, that's not going to be an easy game for them. So, I mean, there is a way that if they start losing some of these games, I mean, that pressure might start mounting and Dabo might start seriously thinking about stepping down. I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying, like you said, Chris, I get Dabo's, his insistence of not using the transfer portal. At first, I was like, why the hell is this guy not, going out and just buying into the portal? And then I think it hit me one day and I realized, look, Dabo wants to be able to pitch that to these recruits. Listen, when you come here, I'm not going to go out and try to replace you in the portal. Okay. You can come here and my word is bond. I stand on that, right? You can believe me when I say that. And I think while everybody tries to zig, he zags. And that's been Dabo, from the time he got his job as a head coach. He's always been a little quirky, but I think people buy that. I think people respect that. I mean, he still is able to recruit, and he's still able to get people to come there, and I think that's kind of part of it. Do I agree with it 100%? No. I think in today's day and age, you've got to be able to go out and utilize that portal in certain areas, especially the wide receiver position, because like you said, if you're not a Clemson fan, trying to name one Clemson wide receiver this year that you think might put up numbers is going to be very, very difficult. But yeah, I mean, do I think Clemson's going to fall off a map this year? No. But do I think they could lose, 4, 5-ish games? 100%. If they're not careful, 100%. And we talk about Louisville and South Carolina. Those are two great teams. Then that's not even putting in the fact that, a lot of people are very high on Virginia Tech. They got to travel to play that game on the road at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think it's going to be tough this season because, like I said, I didn't like the way they really played last year. And I don't know how much better they really got in this offseason. I do think the defense has carried them the past couple of seasons personally. I mean, if you watch Clemson last year, man, they turned the ball over a ton. They were up there with Nebraska, some of those teams, and they struggled to put points on the board. And I'm not placing all the blame at the feet of Cade Klubnik either. I'm not. But didn't they bring in Lincoln Riley's brother to be offensive coordinator? Is that right? What's his name?
Yeah.
I mean, he's supposed to be. Yeah, Garrett Riley. Yes. I mean, I didn't see much improvement. I didn't. And I think there's a lot of pressure this year that offense gets back on track and doing what we think Clemson's capable of doing offensively. I mean, I could go through this long list of players that Clemson's had the past, how many years now they're off the NFL, all studs, running backs, receivers, it's like quarterbacks. Like they got to get back to that because that's what was getting them ACC titles and competing for national titles and winning them. I mean, I know it's not easy to do to win a national title. Only one team can do it every year. I get all that, but man, it's just been, to me, it's like they're going in the wrong direction. I think that needs to turn around. And I think it's going to have to be this season. I like I said, if you guys don't believe me, Dabo said some pretty questionable stuff as a coach last year when he was going through that. I do remember something along the lines, if you don't like what I'm doing, then get rid of me. That's always, you don't want to hear that from your head coach, especially one that's won a national title. I don't think that's a good thing. And maybe he doesn't mean much by it, but just, reading the tea leaves there, man, that's not a good thing. It was pretty heated there for a while, and they were losing games. They were losing games to NC State, losing games to Duke. Duke. I mean, really? I mean, I never thought I'd see the day that Duke would beat Clemson in football, honestly. So, I know they lost another. They played one of those other teams too that was really close last year. I can't remember if it was Pitt or somebody. It was an ugly ass game. I mean, it just didn't look good last year. So.
I think we'll segue here. We got another hot take for you here, guys. Someone other than Ohio State wins the Big Ten. Chris, I'll start us off with this one here. Look, when you look at Ohio State, you look at the Big Ten this year. There's a couple of new additions. Obviously, you got Oregon, you've got USC, Washington comes over into that, and then UCLA. Who do I think out of those teams really has a shot? I mean, I would say really Oregon, and then USC is definitely a little bit worse than them. I think we can all agree with that. I would say Oregon probably out of everybody else has the best shot. Penn State, to me, they have to prove that they can beat a Ohio State. I'm not worried about them beating Michigan because obviously I don't think this is going to be the same Michigan team that we've seen in the years past. But can they beat an Oregon? Can they beat a Ohio State? You know what I mean? That's the big thing. And then for Oregon, I want to keep it parked here for just a second. I want to talk about Oregon. And they got Dillon Gabriel over there from Oklahoma. I want to read you his stat line that I was able to pull up, and I'll kind of talk about why I think this matters a little bit here. So Gabriel, just like Bo Nix, when they got Bo Nix, been around college football forever, right? Last year at Oklahoma, Gabriel put up 3,600 yards and 30 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. Okay, the year prior, Bo Nix first year at Oregon, he put up 29 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Okay. Last year, Bo Nix put up 4,500 yards, 45 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. Okay. So I think Gabriel has a shot to have a Bo Nix-like season. All right. I think he does. Gabriel's a little more, I would say, like he can throw the football. I'm not worried about Dillon Gabriel throwing the football. And he's also a big guy. He can run. He can kind of do some things, I would say, almost in that Marcus Mariota kind of vein, if you will. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Mariota. I think. So Oregon has a shot there. The thing to me that kind of worries me a little bit is, we saw what happened last year when they played Washington. In both those games that they played Washington, the only 2 losses they had last year were to Washington, and they kind of looked not necessarily as physical. Like they weren't, I felt like on the defensive side of the ball in those games as physical as they wanted to be. They looked lost at times. Washington was able to create mismatches, and they were just able to take advantage of that in both games. And then you go back to the other side. I think Dan Lanning kind of made some mistakes, that he said later on. He's like, I probably wish I could have had that back. I think in the first game, obviously, it was just being too aggressive. I think in the second game, if I remember correctly, it was, they were too conservative. So he's got to find that balance, you know what I mean? I think in order to be successful. Chris, I want to throw that back over to you.
Yeah, I actually, I put my money where my mouth is. I have Oregon winning the Big Ten this year. I think that they're going to get it done. It's not a knock on Ohio State. I think Ohio State's probably the most talented team in the country. My biggest question mark with Ohio State is Will Howard. We've talked about that at length on this show, but I think with Oregon, they have the right recipe there, man. You got one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You got one of the best linebacking groups in the country. You got one of the best receiving cores in the country. They're going to be very, very good, and they're balanced on offense, especially too at the running back position. I think it's going to come down to those 2 teams, but I do think there's a couple teams that you can watch out for. I know I'm very high on USC this year. For the last time in my life, I'm going to actually put some money on them to do something. I actually think maybe Lincoln Riley can get a defense, field one time. We know their offense will be great. I think USC is one of those darker horse types of teams. I know we talked about Michigan last week, and I think Michigan's going to be a good football team. I don't think they're going to win a Big Ten title this year. There's too many question marks with them on offense, Christian. And another team too is Penn State, right? And I have died on the hill of James Franklin year in, year out. We talked about it last year. We were both high on them. And it's not that Penn State and James Franklin is a bad coach or a bad team. It's just they can't win one of those big games against Michigan or Ohio State. And I want to see it done. And it comes down to the quarterback play. It does. We saw that last year again with Drew Aller. And I finally am off that hype train. I got to see it to believe it, Christian. And I think, is there anybody really outside those 5 teams that I mentioned that you really think that could really do something this year? Iowa's got a really easy schedule. We know their defense is going to be good. Could a Wisconsin or Nebraska sneak in there? I don't think so. They just don't have the depth that a lot of these other teams do. Any thoughts on that, Christian, as far as maybe one of these sleeper teams maybe making a Big Ten title game or pushing one of these top tier teams maybe?
Yeah, I would say, it's kind of like saying, Kentucky, in the SEC is going to make the SEC championship game. No, there's too many other good teams. That doesn't mean Kentucky can't have a great season, right? Even though they've got more talent, and I like Bob Stoops as a coach. I just think that, they have the disadvantage of playing in a really tough conference. You could make the same argument here, right? They do away with the divisions, which I think is good for the conference. But then they also add in some teams that are going to come over that, frankly, I like their coach a lot more. You know what I mean? I like Dan Lanning as a coach. I like, I like Lincoln Riley as an offensive mind. I like these coaches. I like the talent that they've, accrued on both those schools. But it makes it very difficult when you're talking about like a mid-tier team trying to make a play, for the Big Ten. Like you have to go out, you have to utilize the portal, get a bunch of talent in, but you also have to build from, a solid recruiting base and keep getting those guys in. If you're a Wisconsin, if you're a Nebraska. And I think that kind of leaves, like you said, some of those mid-tier schools, kind of out in the cold a little bit, right? Where the best case scenario is, you kind of got to look at Kentucky as like a blueprint for this, where you might have an 8 or 9 win season. You're not competing for you're not competing for the the conference championship, but you had a great moral victory of a season. You get to go to a decent bowl game. It is what it is. And unless they start expanding the playoffs to like 24 plus teams, you're just not going to really see that parity in there where somebody like a, Nebraska or Wisconsin or,
right.
A Minnesota or whoever can really get in, or an Iowa even, and get in and make a run at this, I think. Getting back to the question, as far as someone other than Ohio State winning the Big Ten, I think it's Ohio State's, conference to lose this year, right? I think they get back, more than just about any of the other teams we've mentioned from a production standpoint. I think that they're one of the most talented teams in the country. I think this is a prove-it year, for our boy Ryan Day. I think the addition of Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator is going to be pretty great for him. I mean, so it's really their conference to lose. I don't think, similarly to last year, how like Washington went on that magical run, I think this is Ohio State's year, to kind of do some things. Now, once you get in the playoff, anything can happen. We still got to see how that plays out in this expanded playoff, but anything can happen. So, yeah, I think that, for Ohio State, like I like Oregon. I think Oregon might try to go for some revenge or something like that. I think they can do pretty well and they can make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State, you know what I mean, and win the Big Ten this year.
Well, you're going to be wrong because Oregon is going to knock off Ohio State. And you know what? The only thing I will say this, I forgot to mention about Oregon, Christian, the same thing that we say about kind of USC and Lincoln Riley a little bit applies to Oregon. Why? Dan Lanning, what's his biggest win as a coach at Oregon? It's probably Utah a couple of years ago. Utah ended up winning the Pac-12 that year. Last year, people forget, you mentioned it, they lost to Washington twice. That was their only 2 losses the whole entire year and pretty much beat the hell out of everybody else they were supposed to, right? Problem is, though, Oregon was favored in both those games. I mean, they were, and I love Dan Lanning just as much as you do. And I think, though, this year they get off that hump, and everybody, has to remember Oregon does play Ohio State in the middle of the year. That's going to be number 2 versus number 3. If everybody's undefeated up into that point, which both these teams should be, it'll be a really interesting game. And I think you're going to get a rematch back for the Big Ten title. That's just my opinion, how I kind of have it playing out this year. But yeah, I like I said, Christian, would you agree with me? I got a question for you first about Ohio State real quickly on this topic. I know we're kind of dragging this out, but do you think Will Howard is better than Kyle McCord or will be better than Kyle McCord was for Ohio State last year?
No. And then I'm going to explain why I say no. I'm going to explain why I say no. Okay. I think Kyle McCord is a better thrower of the football, right? Call me crazy. I know they struggled to throw the ball at times last year, but I do think he is, but they also had a lot of offensive line issues too. We can't discredit that. Their offensive line gave up a lot of sacks. I mean, they struggled to throw the football at times because of that. I'm actually, like I said, I like Kyle McCord. I think he's a better thrower of the football. I think when it comes to Will Howard, I think Will Howard is a better athlete overall. Like I think he can make more plays, on the run, kind of move the pocket. And I think that will be, better for them. Right. So, from a quarterback prospect, just talking about like maybe as a pro style quarterback, if everything sets up the right way, hey, I'll probably lean Kyle McCord. But just from the other side of that, why I think Will Howard could end up being better, because he can move. If the pocket breaks down, he can move. He's not going to be a statue back there. He can make some things happen with his feet. Again, and that can probably kind of play to their strengths. I mean, that you got to think again. They get Chip Kelly. I know I said that before. Yeah. I'll say it again. Chip Kelly made his, he buttered his bread, if you will, with athletic quarterbacks. So Will Howard fits that mold. I think, he's played a lot of football over there at K-State. I mean, he's got a chance to do some really great things this year, I think, at Ohio State.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah. No, I you just remember the reason why I brought that up quick was Ohio State fans wanted Kyle McCord gone, right? Remember that? They wanted him out of there. He was a terrible quarterback, all this stuff. And I was like, man, the guy lost 1 football game as a starter in his first year starting. 99.9% of the country would take that in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? Right. But Ohio State's expectations are as high as probably any team in the country. It's national title or your season's a bust. That's just how it is there. And it's crazy to think about because I thought McCord wasn't a terrible quarterback. I don't, like you said it best, I didn't think all of their problems offensively last year were his fault. I didn't. I thought there was a lot of pressure on the kid. Now, I know he did have elite receivers in Marvin Harrison and all those guys. I get that, but they did struggle up front offensively on the line. So, yeah, I had to pose that question to you, though.
All right, Chris, it's time to talk about what this thumbnail, what the title of this video is actually about. And that is hot take. Texas and Oklahoma take over the SEC this year. Now, I want to preface this with saying, when we say take over, what does that mean? That means come in, knock off the big dogs in the SEC, the Georgias, the Alabamas, right? The Ole Misses. I know it's kind of weird to say that. The Ole Misses, right? Those kind of teams in the SEC, and just cause havoc. They take over the SEC. They end up, playing twice this year, right? Once in the regular season, and at the end of the year, maybe make it to the SEC title game and play each other again. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
No, I know that might shock some people. One, I'm going to talk about Texas. I have to see it to believe it in the SEC. I've said this over and over again. I'll say it one more time. I believe the SEC is the toughest conference in the country, and I don't even think it's close. Now, I think the Big Ten has some really, really good teams in it? Yes, but I'm talking about top to bottom. From top to bottom, I think the SEC is the toughest conference in the country. It's hard to debate that over the last 20 years. Just look at the national titles won and where they're from. I think Texas having to play the SEC schedule week in and week out, and what I just alluded to is going to be interesting to me personally, because they're not going to be playing BYU's, Cincinnati's, Houston's, those teams. You're going to be playing Kentucky, Auburn, at places like that too, which are very, very tough to play. The Swamp, places like that. I don't think they get it done this year, Texas. I know I'm one of the very few people that'll come on here and say it, but I think Texas will be a good team this year. I think they're a little overrated in my opinion. I get the offense. I understand all that. I know Quinn Ewers is a stud. I get it. I agree with you, and I like Sarkisian. But on the flip side, OU, I don't. I think Texas is way more equipped to deal with the SEC than Oklahoma is right now, just where they're at on far as talent, coaching, and as a team. I think OU, with the schedule OU has this year, is very, very tough. Texas is relatively easy. OU is going to have it tough, I think. It's going to be tough for OU. Why, Christian? We talked about when we did our prediction video on Oklahoma. Their defense is, I just don't think it's equipped for the SEC right now. Not right now. It doesn't mean that they might not be in a few years, but they gave up a lot of points last year. And we know how the SEC is. If you don't have a defense, you're not playing for a conference title. Just look at the history of Alabama, Georgia, some of these schools, LSU when they were in their prime. You're going to have to bring a defense. And when you're giving up 35, 36 points a game, I know this year might be a different story, but they're going to have to get a lot better. And I think with that schedule, Oklahoma's going to have a tough time. What's your thoughts on this, though, and what do you think?
Yeah, I'll start with Oklahoma, and I'll just kind of go back a few years when they hired Brent Venables. I thought when they hired Brent Venables and you knew that they were moving to the SEC, I said at that time, hey, I really like this move. I think that Brent Venables, was a guy that kind of built Clemson's defense up. He's a defensive kind of guru, right? He's going to make Oklahoma a little more balanced, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It was going to set up really well as they come into the SEC. Last couple of years, Oklahoma's defense, now I believe Venables going into his third year right at Oklahoma. So their defense last year wasn't all that great. I watched their spring game, and they had a kid that, don't get me wrong, he was talented, but he went for like 150 yards receiving in the first half of their spring game. Now, I get it. Oklahoma was supposed to be this high-flying offense, but come on now. What do you think Ole Miss? What do you think Texas is going to do? What do you think Alabama is going to do? What do you think Missouri is going to do when you start playing some of these teams? I mean, what are you going to have to rely on trying to beat teams, 55 to 52? I mean, we saw how that worked out last year for, LSU, right? And it caused them to lose games. I just think, both, for Oklahoma, they're going to have to get better. And I understand a lot of people don't like that when we talk about spring games, but you can start to gain some things from a spring game. Are you going to get a whole scope of a season off a spring game? Hell no, you're not. But you can start to look for things. Okay, hey, is it a little more even, right? Is the defense kind of coming up? Are they making plays? Are they shutting that down? No, they did not. So getting back to Texas, I saw the same thing with Texas. It didn't matter who they had back there throwing the football. I understand Texas has one of the great, the best receiving rooms in the country. But at a certain point, what does that mean about the DBs? I mean, they got cooked in that game. I mean, everywhere you look, it's the same thing. So to me, Texas and Oklahoma, I think Texas is in a better spot because they have more talent. I think they had a better run last year, with the exception of that Oklahoma game. And I think Texas just has that confidence coming into this. Now, does that mean Texas is going to come in, out of the two, Texas and Oklahoma, who has the best shot to be successful? I would say Texas. But even Texas, to me, do I think that, they can beat, do I think they could beat Missouri? Do I think they could beat Georgia? I think they can make it close, but I think ultimately, those two teams that we mentioned, I think they could make a run at it, right? I think that they could probably beat Texas. I know a lot of people are going to be pretty high on Texas this year. They're going to have to prove that their defense is up to par to come into the SEC and play.
No, I agree with you. You know, I think it's going to be interesting because, like I said, these two teams were powerhouses in the Big 12, and like I said, I don't want to shit on both these teams, but again, it's the SEC, and there's a lot of good teams in the SEC. Christian, Missouri, even people like teams like Tennessee. Kentucky's not the easiest. Playing at Auburn, I don't care what you think about Auburn. I know they haven't been great the last couple seasons, but they seem to win a couple games they shouldn't. LSU, what do you think of them? Ole Miss is in the height of their lifetime, far as the program goes in football right now. And then you obviously have the Alabama and Georgias of the world that have been running the SEC. I just think it's going to be tough for Texas to come in this season, year one being in the SEC. I know the schedule isn't super tough. But you said it best. We both agree on it. We need to see a little bit out of Texas defense. I thought they got torched a couple times last year in the back end. They lost their two best playmakers are off the NFL. I think it's going to be tough. Like I said, you're going to try to go out and, outscore everybody. Sometimes that works, but man, on a week in and week out basis though, I just don't think that's uber successful, especially in the SEC. I think you can get away with that in the Big 12 or maybe the ACC, but some of these conferences, man, are just a little bit tougher, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I think too, we talk about it all the time. It's like in the NFL, look, you look at who wins Super Bowls, it's the more offensive minded individuals. In college football, you go back and you look at the last however many national championships, and it really boils down to who has the best defense and who's the most disciplined on defense, right? And I mean, it's Georgia, it's Clemson, it's Alabama. In Michigan last year, they were a great example of it. If Michigan didn't have, a very experienced defense and have a really good defense last year, they're probably not beating Ohio State. They're probably not beating Penn State last year, right? They probably don't even make it to the playoffs. So, that all plays into it. Then once they got in the playoffs, they had to play Bama and Washington, and they were able to kind of limit them, I felt like, and really be, physical with them. But yeah, Chris, again, it's defense still in college football. It still means something. And I know I sound like the old guy here, even though you're 75 years old over there. Yeah. But I will die on that hill.
Ooh, wow, that's got an awfully big hill then. Yeah. I agree. I just think, like I said, man, it's going to be interesting. I said this is what's great about college football, right? We get these two teams over here in the SEC. We've wanted to see it for a while. I've said it for years about Texas. I would like to see them play an SEC schedule because you know how Texas fans are, man. They're the best every year. I hear it up here in Nebraska all the time. And now you're going to get your chance, man. You're going to be playing with the best of the best week in and week out. And I like Sark, man. I do. I think he's a good coach. I think he fits in very, very well with Texas. And they needed that. They needed him badly. Texas was in kind of a dead space there for quite a while, until they hired him, and he's kind of changed the culture there, and they've been recruiting well. But, the end of the year, we're going to, like I said, the great thing is these aren't played on paper, man. It's going to be played on Saturdays, and we're going to get to see what happens. And that's what I'm excited about over here. And I know you are as well, Christian. So.
Well, guys, we're hit that point of the show where it's the 2-minute drill. We'll stick around here for a few more minutes. We'll talk anything you guys want to talk about. We'll talk Texas, Oklahoma. We can talk Clemson. We can talk whoever you want to talk about. Whatever going on in college football you guys want to talk about it.
Yeah. Or Christian will give you life advice. If you got any questions there, this guy's a guru.
Oh, but by God, I wouldn't quite say that. I can talk about the bulk. It's been pretty successful the last 8 years, if you will. So yeah, we can talk about that. Now it's cutting season, son.
Oh yeah. Cutting season, he says. Come on. Give us a question.
See, I'll go back here. Okay. Gator Swag says Florida beats Texas in an upset this year. That could be a trap game for him. Unless it's a trap house down in Florida, I don't know.
No,
I don't quite know.
Not going to happen. Texas too talented, man. I got to see more of Florida's defense.
Is that game, by the way, in the swamp?
I think it is.
Yeah. Well, crazy things happen at the swamp. By the way, I got to say this, I am upping what I said about Florida. I know I did pick them. I was less than Chris was, which probably shocked a lot of people, but I've reevaluated it.
Reevaluated 4-8.
Well, I said, like 5 wins. I think, 5 wins. Florida will beat some people they're not supposed to this year.
Man,
The thing about Florida that makes it so hard is they're playing 8 potential top 25 teams, depending on whether it's beginning of the year, middle, end of the year, out of the 12 that they're playing. So, I mean, that's what makes Florida such a tough thing is you got to play some really tough schools. I mean, even UCF.
Yeah, no, you're right though. But if you flip flop, if you brought up Missouri's schedule and gave them Missouri's schedule, I would say Florida probably wins 6 or 7 games potentially. But because yes, they're playing the schedule that they have, I don't care if you give Ohio State that schedule. It'd be tough. It'd be damn near impossible to come out of that thing unscathed, man. Florida didn't, in my opinion, has the toughest schedule in the country. I don't even think it's really close, man. Those last 5 games are insane.
Chris Smart goes to prison for all the 50 pill layers he got arrested. Oh, all the players. There was a documentary that came out, actually. I think it was called Swamp Kings. It was talking about when you guys won a couple national championships.
Yeah.
And why don't we go back and look at all the players that got arrested?
One out of every
during
3
that
on
era
that
of
team.
Florida. Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. What I think really is going on with the whole Georgia driving arrest, everything of that nature, we're just the one guy, wide receiver we had, was it Nick Lubbock or whoever it was that, got arrested. I mean, that was something completely different. I think that was for like actual abuse, like spousal abuse or something like that, allegedly. So we don't know. But the rest of it is, I think when that player died, right? When they went out and drag racing a few years ago, when it was DeAndre Carter, I should say, when he went out and that recruiting staff, died, when that recruiting staff member died and then the other player died as well, I think that the Athens Police Department at that point said enough is enough. We are going to start holding them accountable. Right. And I think that you could make the argument, again, right, wrong, indifferent. I think you can make the argument. This goes on in every college town across America. Kids drive, they do dumb shit, they drink, they have marijuana. And I'm not advocating for it. Okay. I want to make sure we obviously put that out right now. I am not advocating for it. I'm not trying to make an argument here. I am just saying it goes around in every college town in America. Okay. Whether it be, college athletes or non-college athletes, it happens. Okay, it is wrong. I think Kirby has come out. He's tried to own it, but short of just saying, "Hey, you guys can't drive. We're gonna pay for 125 Ubers, or drivers for you guys." What can you really do? How do you stop that problem? Short of removing every single player's driver's license.
Here's the deal. I know I agree with you. Here's the thing. You got to be an idiot not to understand this, though. The reason why this is in the spotlight, one, is because Georgia's winning. They're the top tier. Florida State, remember that? Jameis Winston, they had so many problems there. Florida, Urban Meyer, Nebraska in the 90s, Lawrence Phillips, that whole thing. It gets brought to the forefront when you're winning. The Patriots in the NFL, cheating. It was constant. Michigan last year. If you look at the history of teams winning, 90% of the time, the focus is on, there must be doing something illegal. This shit goes on everywhere, guys. I was in college. This shit goes on at every major program. I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's right, but it gets brought to the spotlight. Why? Because Georgia's the top tier dog in college football and has been for basically the last 3 or 4 years. It happened with Urban Meyer in Florida. I could go down the list, dude. It's exactly what's going on. And yes, do they need to change some things? Yes, because it's sad. You guys have had like 27 arrests and 2 dead people over this deal. And yeah, it is a problem. I mean, it needs to be addressed, but don't think this shit isn't going on at other schools, because it is.
And at least we're not doing the Mike Gundy approach where we're coming out saying, well, hey, the amount of times that I've driven while drunk, and you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly. It does need to get cleaned up, but kids are going to be kids though. I hate to say that. You can't follow them around 24/7. I mean, if you want to go do some dumb shit right after this podcast, Christian, you can go do some dumb shit. Nobody's going to stop you.
Oh, 100%. And here's the other side of it too. Swag, I want to pose this question to you specifically, or anybody for that matter that's listening to this podcast, at this juncture. If I said right now, let's say you're not a Georgia fan, you're not a Bama fan, whatever have you. If I can tell you right now, hey, you get 25 arrests over the course of a 3-year period, but I guarantee you're going to have 2 national titles. Would you take that deal? Chris, if you're going to have 25 players arrested for driving or some sort of issues, just in general, but Nebraska wins 2 national championships over the next 4 years or 3 years, would you take that deal?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as nobody gets killed or injured. Obviously, I don't want that, but I'll take it. Of course I would.
100%. And Swag, I got to ask the same question to you. Would you take the deal for Florida? Would you take the arrest if it meant Florida would be national champions? And I think that's the question we all ask, right? We play this moral thing when it comes to a team we don't like, where we throw out there, look at the arrest, they have a culture problem, but you take the championships, right? Everybody would take that deal. Billy Napier's had 0 players arrested. Well, great. He has 0 national titles. He has 0 SEC championships.
Yeah,
he has 0 winning seasons since he's got to Gainesville.
Yep.
Am I wrong with that? Has he won 6 games?
I think they made a bowl game his first year, but then got blown out the water or whatever. But no, you're exactly right. That's the thing. It doesn't get brought up even if there was, because Florida isn't nationally relevant. No different than Nebraska, no different than most of these teams out here. But like I said, you got to be pretty naive to think that Nebraska isn't, or not Nebraska, but there's other schools aren't doing this shit. The shit's been going on. It's just under the spotlight more because it's Georgia right now, and everybody wants to nitpick Georgia and Kirby, his disciplinary issues, right? Oh, he's not doing enough. He's not. Look at what happens at Georgia. They got a bunch of thugs running around. They're not policing anybody over there. He's letting them get away with everything. That happens even in high school at certain teams. It's been going on for a while. Christian played high school ball. He knows what I'm talking about. There's schools that get away with stuff all the time. There's people at my school that got away with stuff, Well, but because we're really good, it's just how it is, man. That's the way the world is.
Because you were talking about it too. Like, you go back and you look at it, even in the NFL, go look at the Cowboys back in the day. Go look at the Miami Hurricanes, for a matter of fact.
Oh, God, yeah.
Back in the day, the Cocaine Cowboys or whatever that whole documentary that came from that. You look at Nebraska in the 90s. I mean, wasn't it Tom Osborne that basically said something like that, where he's like, I don't want a bunch of, goody goodies. I want guys that got a little edge to them, right? I give them to me. I'll figure out a way to make it work. Of course, now we don't have the world of cell phones and instant media like we did. If we did, I'm sure that God only knows the kind of stuff we would be reading or hearing about. But yeah, this has been going on forever in college football. I'm not minimizing it, like you said. I'll take it as long as someone's not dying, right? Obviously, we don't want anybody to die. 2 people did die from this, but a lot of the other arrests have been just guys speeding, guys drag racing, guys doing just dumb shit. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. It's a point where Kirby has to start doing something about it. But the question then becomes, and I think Kirby even said it, he's like, hey, we're finding them. We're taking money away from these guys, which is something to do. But, what do you do short of kicking them off of a team? I remember Urban Meyer, interestingly enough, in that documentary, when he said he kicked a player off of the team because he got in some trouble. And he said the guy ended up dying because he ended up going back to, the lifestyle he was, before there. And Urban said after that, he said, I'll never do that again.
So he regretted
it. Falls on Kirby. He's the head coach. Yeah, you're right. It does fall on Kirby.
Yeah, but he's not the one killing players. Swag, you got to pull your head out of your ass there. It's not Kirby going out there. Kids want to do something stupid, they're going to do something stupid. That's no different. I'm not, like I said, as far as disciplinary goes, he's trying to do what he can do. But at the end of the day, you can't police these kids 24/7 and follow them around all day. If you're going to do some dumb shit, you're going to do some dumb shit. Like Christian said, Urban Meyer was no different. There were players that died on his team. There was a lot of stuff going on. Should we talk about Aaron Hernandez and what he was doing? That guy was killing people. I'm not blaming Urban Meyer for that, but my thing is like, I think Kirby's getting a lot of attention for it because he is the head coach and that is his job and it falls under him. But I can't place the blame solely on Kirby. I think it falls on a lot of different things. And I think this goes on a lot more than people think at other programs, major programs, especially. I can guarantee you that.
I agree. We could talk about it until the cows come home. It's just, there's, again, I understand like, hey, you have to implement things here, but short of, and I know what the answer is. It's a lose-lose situation, right? You want them to say, hey, we're going to kick everybody off the team, right? If you were, if this was going on at Florida, maybe the answers would be a lot different. It's easy to sit here and Monday morning quarterback this thing and look at it from 10,000 feet above. But when it's your own team, when it's somebody that, you look at and you're like, okay, well, you maybe look at it a different way. And I do agree, hey, it's really stupid. But you also have to admit, too, if it was any other college at any other place, like, would that happen? Does this happen at Alabama? That's the question. Well, no, not to this degree, but also you could make the argument the reason why it doesn't happen necessarily at Alabama is nobody has died, in a driving related incident in Alabama. If they did, best believe the Tuscaloosa Police Department would probably start making more of an example out of these athletes, right? So, like I said, I don't know what you do about it, short of saying, hey, nobody can drive. Here's what we're going to do. If you guys want to, drink, drive, do drug, whatever, we're going to go rent a place out in the Las Vegas desert. We're going to go get a ranch out there. We'll rent you guys a bunch of exotic cars, and you guys can go do a bunch of dumb shit, in the summer for like 2 months. And then when you come back on campus, you guys all have drivers. I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah. I got nothing more to add to this.
Well, guys, it's that point of the show where we're just past an hour. So we'll be back again on Wednesday. Like they were saying, 2 more weeks, and then we're right there. We're in there. We are in there. Right. And so I'm excited about it. Chris, any closing thoughts here?
No, nothing else, man. Like you said, 2 weeks away, guys, from football starting. Like I said, we're going to get into it pretty heavy on Wednesday. We got some good topics coming too as well. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, we'll be back on Wednesday. And like I said, I want everybody to have a good weekend. It's nice out there. So enjoy that. And oh yeah, by the way, make sure to watch some NFL preseason so you can be bored out of your mind. Don't forget that.
Just like Chris, you know what I mean? If it's the NFL preseason, we're still betting over here at the I-80 boys. Well,
yeah,
guys, we'll catch you guys on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your weekend. Don't do anything